We're in the middle of the summer real estate swing where this is our busiest season, and there's a lot of opinions about what's going on in the real estate market. Some people think the market's crashing, it's all doom and gloom, while others think, based on their real estate feeds and their Facebook posts, that the market's doing great and everything's flowery and wonderful and everything's good. And it's a perfect time to sell your home. Don't even think about it. Let's just go on the market. Well, the reality is something in between. There are some challenges going on in the market, but there's also some positive signs as well. And we're going to jump into a rundown on exactly where the real estate market is, specifically here in the North Texas Granbury region. When we discuss the real estate market, it's important to take a look at the national news that's going on because that is the driver for everything. But also note that national news isn't always accurate for what's going on here locally. Local is king, and when it comes to real estate, you really want to pay attention to what's going on in the local market. So we try to balance that with a look at national news, what's going on nationally, what are the big picture items, and then what's going on here in Granbury, Weatherford, Fort Worth, Toller, Glen Rose, what's going on right here in our backyard, and how does that market unique versus what we see at the national level. So let's start with sharing my screen. I've got a paid subscription to a site that is actually some of the best in class information if you're trying to follow the housing market, and it's a place called Housing Wire. This article is how the housing market survived the Iran conflict. And it goes into detail about how the year started off with a boom. Our interest rates were at 3-year lows, and we were starting to see the market really warm up. So what we've seen essentially is the market has not responded as negatively as everyone expected it would, but it has caused some negative impact to the amount of growth that we were expecting to see for the year. The market was really poised to do kind of a nice jump in sales and rates being lower, and it was going to really help get things moving, lubricate the real estate wheels, if you will. And instead of that, what we had was a slowdown with the amount of listings coming on the market and the amount of sales that were happening. So the next thing we want to look at is, now that the Iran conflict is hopefully nearing its end, we're seeing some resolutions being put forward, some agreements, some ceasefires. We're seeing oil prices begin to drop. What is the expected outcome for this, and what is it going to lead to in the next 6 months or so? So we're going to take a look at this article. Oil prices have crashed, but mortgage rates are rising. What gives? And essentially, this article goes through the fact that oil hit $111 a barrel, driving inflation up, causing the Fed to be concerned about rates and therefore considering maybe even raising rates. Whereas at the beginning of the year, they had 3 rate cuts on the table. They had 3 rate cuts on the table. Now they're thinking about 1 to 3 rate hikes on the table due to this inflation. What this has done is it's slowed the market down. But what do we see now that oil prices are down to $73 a barrel? I actually checked this morning and it was down to 68. So this article is 2 days old or a few days old. So we've actually seen oil prices go even lower than when this was coming out. Why is it that even today the mortgage rates are still staying so high? Well, there are other concerns. The mortgage rates are worried about rate hikes coming, and therefore they're pricing in this possibility that rates may actually go up. And so they're rising in anticipation of that, despite the fact that oil prices have come down. Now, the silver lining is that if you go back to 2022, 23, there was a run on the banks. Silicon Valley Bank, being one of the big ones, went insolvent, and it caused there to be a major concern with banks not being able to handle the pressures of a recession. And what it caused was there's a 10-year treasury yield, maybe it sets at like 4.4%, and the interest rates, instead of being 6.5%, they jumped up to 7.5%, even though the 10-year treasury was where it was. And now that we've gotten these banks accustomed, and they actually, this is the article, the Fed annual stress test finds bank resilient in severe recession scenario. The banks kind of getting their sea legs with this volatile market has caused the spreads over time to improve, where a 4.5 on the treasury yield leads to a 6.5 interest rate instead of a 7.5. So we've seen rates actually become lower over time, even though the 10-year treasury yield has continued at its higher rate, sitting close to 4.5. So the good news is that the market is beginning to adapt a little bit, and we're seeing rates remain relatively stable despite the fact there's all this volatility going on. So what does all this mean for you? Well, what it means is that right now, we have a good bit of inventory on the market. Buyers are able to work out a little bit better deals for themselves in the current market than they were able to a year and a half, 2, 3 years ago. So it's a good time in order to work out a better deal. Prices are coming down a little bit. We're seeing prices drop by 1 to 3% this year. So we're seeing buyers get better deals on homes right now. Nationally, things are a little bit more stable, but here locally, there's been a lot of inventory that has been brought about by new construction. And so this inventory has caused prices actually to go down. And there was actually a weird thing that happened toward the end of last year where new home prices are lower than existing homes, which is very strange. It's not something that we've seen historically. And so that trend has continued this year. And so there are great options for new homes, and also the new homes dropping below existing homes is causing the existing homes to follow the new home pricing and lowering their prices in order to compete with these new home sales. So that's the market. Homes are still selling, but if you want to sell, you need to be serious about selling in the current market. And two, if you're a buyer, it's a good time to work out a good deal on a home because there's so much homes available that the sellers are competing with one another, and that is to your benefit as a buyer. So hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, you're looking to make a move, we'd love the chance to connect with you or answer any questions you have.